Hello everyone, my name is Jason and I'm from New York City. I'm here to tell you a story that I never thought I would share. It's about my marriage and how I discovered a betrayal so deep it nearly ruined my life. It's a difficult story, but I believe it's one that might help someone out there. Was married to a woman named Serena for 7 years. From the outside, we had a beautiful life, a nice house in the suburbs, 2 cars and successful careers. She was a marketing executive and I was an IT consultant. We were the couple that everyone envied. But there were always signs if I had only paid attention. It started small. Serena would get phone calls and go outside to take them saying they were confidential client meetings. Then she started working late, more often and attending weekend conferences that seemed to appear out of nowhere. I trusted her completely, maybe too completely. The first major red flag came when I noticed she had changed her phone passcode. We had always shared everything, but when I asked about it, she got defensive, saying I was being paranoid and that married couples were allowed to have privacy. She made me feel like I was the problem for even asking. That's when I started paying attention to the little things. The way she would smile at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, how she would take her phone into the shower claiming she was listening to podcasts, and the new clothes she would buy and hide in the back of her closet. But I still didn't want to believe it. You never want to believe it about someone you love. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in April. I came home early from a client meeting that was canceled and I heard her upstairs on the phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but our house has thin walls and she was laughing. It wasn't the laugh. I knew this was different, more intimate. I heard her say something that made my blood run cold. Don't worry, babe. It won't be much longer. I've got everything figured out. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those words. What did she have figured out? What wouldn't be much longer? I decided I needed to know the truth. I know some people would think this makes me a terrible person, but I installed a voice recorder app on her phone when she was in the shower. I had the passcode from watching her type it in when she thought I wasn't looking. I felt sick doing it, but I had to know. For 2 weeks, I didn't find anything concrete. Just normal work calls, conversations with her sister, calls to the dentist. I almost deleted the app, almost convinced myself I was just being paranoid. Then I heard the conversation that changed everything. It was a Saturday morning. She told me she was going to run errands, but I could hear her in the car talking to someone named Thomas. I had never heard her mention a Thomas before. What I heard next still gives me chills. She wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to divorce me, but not in the way you would think. She had been documenting fake incidents of domestic violence, taking pictures of bruises she had given herself, and creating a paper trail of made-up police calls she had planned to file. The part that made me physically sick was her plan to claim I had been emotionally and financially abusive. She had been slowly moving money out of our joint account into an account I didn't know about. She had this whole elaborate plan to take everything in the divorce and potentially have me arrested for abuse that never happened. Thomas wasn't just her boyfriend, he was her divorce lawyer. They had been planning this for months. I sat in my car outside the grocery store, listening to my wife and her lover plot to destroy my life, and I realized I was married to a complete stranger. This woman I had shared a bed with for 7 years had been methodically planning to ruin me. The worst part was when I heard her laugh when Thomas asked if she felt bad about it. She said, "He's so clueless. He'll never see it coming. By the time I'm done with him, he'll be lucky if he can afford a studio apartment." I saved every recording. 3 days later, Serena sat me down for the talk. She was crying, telling me how unhappy she had been, how she thought we should separate. She was so convincing. If I hadn't heard those recordings, I might have believed she was just a woman who had fallen out of love. But I knew better. She moved out the next week, and exactly 14 days later I was served with divorce papers. The allegations were brutal emotional abuse, financial control, threatening behavior. She was asking for alimony, half of everything we owned, and a restraining order. My lawyer looked at the papers and shook his head. He said it was going to be expensive and messy, that these kinds of cases often came down to he said, she said, and that the courts usually sided with the woman. That's when I told him about the recordings. The look on his face was like I had just given him a smoking gun, which I guess I had. We went to court on a humid Thursday morning in July. Serena showed up with Thomas, who I was seeing in person for the first time. He was tall in an expensive suit, the kind of guy who looked like he had never lost a case. He was confident, probably thinking this was going to be an easy win. Serena had prepared quite a performance. She took the stand and testified about years of psychological abuse. She cried at all the right moments, talked about how afraid she had been, how she had felt trapped and isolated. She was good, really good. Her lawyer Thomas was presenting bank statements showing how I had controlled the finances, photos of bruises on her arms, and a timeline of incidents that painted me as a monster. The judge was listening intently and my heart was sinking. Even knowing the truth, Serena was so convincing that I almost believed her myself. Then it was my turn. My lawyer stood up and said, "Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence that shows the plaintiff's testimony is not just false but part of an elaborate fraud." Thomas objected immediately, saying, "We were grasping at straws and trying to victim blame, but the judge allowed it." My lawyer played the first recording. It was Serena talking to Thomas about moving money out of our accounts. You could hear the exact dates and amounts, everything that contradicted her testimony about me controlling the finances. Thomas's face went pale, but he was still composed and professional. Then my lawyer played the second recording, the one where Serena was laughing about how clueless I was, how she was going to take everything. I watched Thomas's expression change. He leaned over to whisper something to Serena, but she was staring straight ahead, frozen. But it was the third recording that broke everything wide open. It was Serena talking to Thomas about the bruises, about how she had been giving them to herself and documenting them, about how she had researched domestic violence shelters to make her story more believable, about how she had practiced crying in the mirror. The courtroom was dead silent except for the sound of my wife's voice planning my destruction. When the recording ended, Thomas stood up and said, "I need to withdraw from this case immediately," and walked out of the courtroom. He didn't even look back. The judge called a recess. When we came back, Serena was sitting alone at her table with no lawyer, looking like she had seen a ghost. The judge asked if she wanted to revise her testimony, giving her one chance to tell the truth. Serena just sat there staring at her hands. In the end, she got nothing. No alimony, no settlement, nothing. The judge was so disgusted by what she had heard that she ordered Serena to pay my legal fees. There was even talk of perjury charges, though those never materialized. I found out later that Thomas had been suspended from practicing law for 7 months for his role in the scheme. Apparently, this wasn't his first time helping a client fabricate evidence. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. I kept the house, the cars, everything. Serena moved in with her sister in another state. I haven't seen her since, but here's the thing that haunts me. If I hadn't found out when I did, if I hadn't recorded those conversations, she would have won. I would have lost everything, and probably ended up with a criminal record for abuse I never committed. How many other men has this happened to? How many didn't have the evidence to prove their innocence? I don't share this story for sympathy. I share it because I learned something important. Sometimes the person sleeping next to you is your worst enemy, and you never know it until it's almost too late. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is.